part of understanding unconscious aspects of cultural structures and how they enforce themselves within us also unconsciously. So, so it is interesting to kind of shifting it back, that psychoanalysis in broader culture is embraced by people in these other critical fields. And for example, critical psychologists, a number of them are staunchly psychoanalytic, and something that's really not often heard of known. And the last thing is the embrace of social ethics. So kind of in psychology, there's been a movement to say ethical code is just to protect our, protect our little domains and our profession, so forth. But it's social ethics and social responsibility, and it can come in conflict with some of the quote-unquote ethical guidelines that we receive as the, law from above. So there's more of a movement to develop it. So awareness, I'm interested always, is that in the U.S., I think it's easy to get isolated. There's a world out there. And also, as the U.S., we have tremendous impact on the world, including, in my opinion, what, we talk about wiping out of cultures, but we're wiping out other indigenous psychology by day. Because people often we come with these empirically validated buzz, and everyone, they say, oh boy, those people practice some voodoo psychology when what they need to do is cognitive behavioral psychology, which, as someone coming from Soviet Union, I've actually did actual studies to show we will be open to almost anything but that, because it is so much like what we have in social, be told how to think and behave. Someone else knows what's the right way for you to think and behave, and they will tell you what it is. What's that's wrong? So that's it is there because it's from America. It's supported by research. It's supported by grants. It's supported, and it's wiping out other voices. And so what some writing people saying there's third world psychologies. Those third world psychologies are disappearing as much as America. Prevention, community action that was mentioned, training. So how can we be psychologists open ourselves to training in such like nonviolent communication, conflict resolution, and then these other post-colonial theories, privilege and oppression. They have some wonderful discussion about how we can step in and address that privilege and oppression in a whole way. So those are developments. So in conclusion, we hope that you come away with greater history, especially of depth psychology. The foundations of psychoanalysis, psychology in general, are very much infused with some social justice foundations or threads. Right? So what is the present? That also you can hear from the study. There are a number of psychologists and communities that do outstanding social justice work. And I hope that we all have some dreams of new developments, that maybe in ourselves we can enter into a space of envisioning what we as psychology, as community and individuals can do towards social justice. So that's the end. We have lots of references, and we don't have copies of those. I didn't make.
I would just like to say that I've known Connie Fisher almost 40 years. When I was a very young psychologist myself. And I'm feeling compelled to say out loud, it is a humanistic conference. The personal and professional benefit from Connie's work has changed my life. And to see her in 2013 being represented by the three of you, I can feel the emotion coming. It's just wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
I just want to echo that as a student of Connie's as well. And I really, what is exciting right here at the end in terms of the conclusions that got me thinking as a teacher myself, wanting my students to place, and seeing the collaborative assessments, which I've seen move from individualizing psychological assessment, collaborative therapeutic assessment, the collaborative assessment, and becoming much more normative in terms of folks being open to it. I think this is AG's chance to really be seen as mainline in terms of placement, and it's just exciting to see where you go with this. So I hope it continues. So I'm putting my email on the thing.
Yes, because something that you've spoken to is the model was developed
effective, what the study is really trying to find is this being used, and it's very meaningful to be able to share this with each of you. So I really appreciate that, and hope that you can continue to support this approach, which has been proven to be effective and for sitting with people.
I'm interested to know, like, what kind of challenges, I mean, do you think it's more challenging in the hospital setting versus like a private practice setting versus, I'm assuming it would be more challenging for us in the hospital setting, what I was thinking there.
Yeah, and just because one of the challenges of not being able to actually go to your individual and get that kind of clarification on those questions can be very challenging. In the hospital setting sometimes where you don't get that opportunity to really sit with the client as much would be hard.
And also the episode that is dependent on what type of hospital. Your client could be in and out in 3 days. So you really don't have the opportunity to do all the feedback sessions and all the collaborative element. But I do feel like the pieces that you can take into the hospital room, such as that you what the doctor wants to know, but what do you want to know? And this is how you are described in the job, but how would you describe yourself?
I think that's the beauty of it, that question. What do you want to know in a generic atmosphere that is extraordinarily healing? Institutionalization.
I was just wondering how you would approach, like, even if to the diagnostician it's not that important to come up with a diagnosis, like if you have to for the site or whatever, and you're doing collaborative assessment, and your diagnosis is different than what the client, like it doesn't, that label doesn't like fit with the client's perspective of what they would label themselves. Like with the ADHD example or whatever, if it found that the ADHD tests like showed no, symptoms or whatever, and that maybe it was due to something else, like his anxiety or whatever, like how would you approach that?
My first thought was really to just explore that. Why doesn't it quite fit? What are some of your understandings about this diagnosis? And maybe just kind of delve into that and stay with that and see what kind of comes with that dialogue.
And also really understand why I mean, I think that might say more about what's going on with the client and more of an understanding of their experience and to maybe take their collaborative approach like I would like your understanding of what's going on, but I'll also include what the data showed.
So it's really giving them the opportunity and the voice to kind of understand what this means to me. I mean, so oftentimes we're in settings where we give the report, we give the diagnosis, we move on, and that's kind of how it is, but really giving them the opportunity to explore kind of what Carla and Dr. Ella talked about, really exploring the meaning and their understanding within the context.
was during my training in community mental health centers, is not only the clients just trying to understand help clients understand what they're wanting to get out of the testing. It didn't always occur to them that they can choose what they want to get out of the testing. But then the clinicians who often refer to the testing, just by trying to better understand what is this referral question when you just say test for ADHD and you contact the clinician and engaging them in a collaborative effort, that all of a sudden these other clinicians are learning a lot more about their clients or learning what they don't know about their clients and kind of engaging in the process too. So there's kind of educational.
That's a great point. And Fisher mentions in many of her articles of going to that referring person and really getting that clarification. And
Yeah, and there was actually an article that I included, the author's name, references, and the benefits of using collaboration with the other physicians for people who were suicidal or had suicidal ideation in an inpatient setting, and it did prove effective. And I think that that's a really good point, to include the physicians as part of the collaborative.
Speaking from my own experience, I work right now in a residential facility for women with intellectual disabilities, and a lot of times the referrals for testing come from the case managers or the nurses. I've seen the collaborative assessment actually change our case managers' perspective to where the initial reason for referral was that women won't stop screaming, tell me what's wrong with her, but yeah, she always does have a reason that she's screaming, and there always is some kind of trigger, some kind of emotional event occurring for the woman that maybe in the moment where she's screaming and the case manager just wants her to stop before 5 other women start screaming. They don't see that. But the practice really does help them as well.
Kind of beef up the cultural talk, and really mean it within these humanistic theories. From a Gestalt perspective, obviously to be authentic, you need to be aware of what assumptions you're holding. If you aren't aware of what those values and assumptions are and where they come from, then it's going to be really hard for you to be in touch with your true self. And then from a technical standpoint, to the extent that it's maybe appropriate, two-chair and empty chair techniques can be used to deal with cultural issues. And so when we talk about maybe doing a two-chair technique to work with a split, we could maybe do that in terms of someone's identity. And so if someone had maybe some ethnic identity concerns or issues they were dealing with, maybe using that two-chair to look at, maybe if it's an acculturation perspective. So the side that's pulling them to the more dominant culture and the side that wants to hold on to their more traditional values. And so maybe we could use the two-chair in that way. We could possibly use the empty chair technique to look at some of those unresolved issues around times a client's been oppressed. And so we can use some of this more creatively to address culture. And so the take-home points for my part is that by not taking these cultural considerations into our theories and making it explicit, then we leave it up to other people to assume what humanistic psychology says or doesn't say about culture. You know, we think we do a good job, but if we're not putting these in our books and we're not putting it in our theories, then we're leaving it up to people that aren't humanistic psychologists to say that for us. I mean, the reality is a lot of students are gravitating now more towards feminist perspectives, more towards other perspectives that talk about it more. And so the idea isn't that I think we would do a bad job with it, but if we don't talk about it, then we're really not, you know, doing our part. And along with that piece about making it explicit, I mean, you often hear the phrase that, you know, if you don't speak up against oppression, you're on the side of the oppressor. And so it's not just a recruitment tactic that we need to address culture. The idea is that if we're not actively doing this and we're silenced about it, you know, if you think in terms of privilege, then we're really not doing our part. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trish, who's going to talk about research.
Aaron just brought up is the fact that we aren't really incorporating it in our books and our theories. And another area where we aren't really incorporating it a lot is in our research. In multicultural research, much of the research has been, there's a lot out there. It's not uncommon. I mean, in looking at our journals, it goes back into the 40s and 50s, this looking at multicultural issues, looking at racial issues, studying them. And when you look at the research, the vast majority of the research through all of the theories, through all of the background of racial issues and racial identity models, is qualitative research. Something that, as humanistic psychologists, we talk about valuing the ability to go in and learn about people, to talk about studies, and to learn the experience, rather than just getting the numbers. So just looking back in research, it goes all the way back into journals that were done, racial journals that are done by non-white therapists, so that people who are multicultural have their own space to read about it. However, now we're in an era where we are trying to put everything into journals that everybody reads so that we can all be on the same page, and we're ethically bound to be on the same page and to understand the multicultural issues that go on for our clients, for the general population, and understand what the experience is that is happening. Again, racial models, as I just mentioned, all the theories of racial models have been studied multiple times over and over again. However, most of the research done is qualitative research. It's understanding how someone experiences their race, how someone becomes who they are through a qualitative experience that's just been labeled out and identified as here's what the people generally go through. And we have various models of identity for race. We have ethnicity models. We have models for gay identities, for going through the LGBT transition, everything that you can have a model on. We've looked at. The hard part being is most of the research isn't going into our journals. When I did a little study, just looking into our journals versus some other journals, looking in the JHP and THP, just did a quick search on PsycInfo. I found the Journal of Humanistic Psychology, and this goes back to the 60s. Oh boy.
My.
That address the multiculturalism as their main discussion, 12 on race and 6 on gender. The humanistic psychologists had 4 on multiculturalism, about 7 on race, and about 3 on gender. Compared to the Journal of Counseling Psychologists in TCP, where going back to the 60s, they have 52. It's multiples more. The hard part being, as humanistic psychologists, a lot of times we prefer to read our journals. We prefer to see what our peers are doing research on. And the humanistic psychologists are doing this research. But for some reason, it's not making it into our journal. So are we missing pieces of the population in humanistic psychology by not publishing this in our journals? I mean, sure, you can go online and find them, but isn't it nicer to be able to look at your own population, look at what your peers are doing on multicultural research? So we do need to kind of boost our efforts to not only address it in our research and make sure that...
So just to elaborate on the results here, in the study, each of the participants was alerted to the criminal activity that was in progress and knew that there was a possibility that the suspect would attempt to flee in the vehicle. In participant 1 situation, the suspect was already being chased by police from neighboring jurisdiction. In 2's, he was responding to a shooting in which the dispatcher advised him that the suspect was leaving the scene in the car, and that's how he identified it. He saw the car. It was a small neighborhood. It was pretty apparent that that was the car he was looking for.
Number 3, waited for a peer officer in an unmarked car to follow the suspect that was in a possible stolen vehicle, and once they met up, he identified the car, and then he got behind him and initiated the chase. In all 3 of these situations, the initial alert did not necessarily place the participant in the primary officer role of the chase, but in each situation, every single one of them ended up being the primary officer. So there's certain responsibilities that that primary officer has, and that is to either continue the chase or not continue the chase, and that is within radio supervision of their supervisor. So the sergeant can always get on the radio and say, you know what, I think you should shut it down, and the officer has to comply. For participant 3, that actually came into play because you need to report how fast you're going and what your direction and things like that. And he was hesitant to really be honest over the radio of how fast he was going because he was over 100 miles an hour because he was afraid his sergeant, who was more of a conservative supervisor, would shut him down. And he didn't want to stop. He wanted to keep chasing. One of the things that participant said too that was really interesting is at one point when he was flying down this road at 100 miles an hour, he thought, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this. He was a rookie officer. He was like, this is just like TV. And I mean, he just felt like Superman for that moment. It was just exhilarating. So in contrast, the anxiety for the sergeant, participant 2 was actually supervisor. And it had been a really, really horrible night around Christmas time, and they had a lot of snow. And they had just been pounded by all of these loud party calls, call after call. And so he was just wanting to go home. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. So when the shooting came down, his anxiety was like negative anxiety, like, I'm going to have to chase this guy, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and then he's in charge, so he doesn't have a supervisor to tell him to shut down. It's his responsibility. And his thought process really goes through this whole, okay, so does policy give me any reason not to do this? Because he doesn't want to do it. Well, the other officer went through the same policy reflections, but his policy reflections was, do I get to do it? So there was a real context difference between a 20-year veteran sergeant and a rookie officer and how what their goals were. Let's see. So after they got the initial anxiety and they started calling the chase, they realized that there was a certain problem.
Any notion of the asymmetrical, even though I still haven't defined it yet, begs us to first talk about the symmetrical. Symmetry is first and foremost an experience. The feel we have rather than closing or constricting. It's a felt sense on the one level. I'm talking about the symmetrical. It's something that anybody can notice at any time in their life, where they're at, one or the other, or a little bit of here, a little bit of there. Right? Am I feeling imbalanced? Am I feeling balanced? That kind of thing. It's fairly easy to feel from the inside. I think it is a territory quite well known for those folks who do any sort of somatic work, body work, like focusing, as I was also trained in that by Eugene Chenlin when I was in Chicago. And as I said, the person-centered approach. These openings and relaxations felt by us or our clients are sometimes prized as indicators of forward movement. And in fact, sometimes they are indicators of forward movement. Also, the experience contains something inexplicable and intangible, what we could call the wordlessness of it all. Something rarely appreciated and even abandoned in contemporary psychology and a lot of professional discussions. There is as well the pull for its permanence. Symmetricalities tend to be self-reinforcing in that we both, therapist and client in one case, want more of this. After all, isn't this what is meant by success in psychotherapy? Who doesn't want more of a good feeling? What the patient comes for, however, for us, is to help them fashion not a positive outcome, I think, but a way of living that is more at ease. So here are the 3 aspects of symmetry. The feel we have inside, a wordlessness of it, and a pull for its impermanence. That's how I would characterize symmetry in the way that I'm using it. So these 3 aspects reveal something about our very human condition, something that I think, as I said, we all know. We have felt understandings without words. We cherish those states of the heart and mind that feel opening to us, and we want to concretize them in small and large ways. So I do think as part of our existential groundedness, these things of having a feel of wordlessness and wanting to make concrete, I think that's part of how human beings function. And although I'm really not an expert in neurobiology, but I've read a little bit of some of this new stuff coming out in that regard. And it's really fascinating how we are hardwired to preference certain experiential moments over others, even though the others are valuable. Sort of part of the flight and fright mechanism. So here's where we get into trouble in the desire for symmetry. Desire and aversion are psychologically visible dualities. They show up in interpersonal levels as anxiety over conflict, avoidance of exposing one's own ideas to judgment, or fearing being judgmental towards others, being vulnerable or intimate, or expressing disapproval and agreement, particularly with our clients. Of course, these are multiply determined states, and so I'm doing really short shrift of this. I'm absolutely painting a big broad brushstroke here. But I believe they all seem like appropriate means towards the harmonious, toward the hope for balance and peace. But keeping these two intentions without actually recognizing them as such, or moving away from the undesirable and moving toward the desired, shortchanges everything. So it's not merely a psychological reality. The twinning, the duality, if you will, shows up in many other ways, in the policies and strategies that we have to work with or confront in our professional lives, no matter what it is we do. If we're a researcher, a scholar, a practitioner. There are many commentaries on this point, so I won't go over those. However, inasmuch as desire and aversion are structured in our life world, in our professional lives, we may be participating in a delusion. The delusion to which I am referring is not only of psychological origin. I reference a delusional state that is characterized by the compensatory move to join the hegemonic desire-aversion dynamic, and thereby mask its heteronomic experiential neighbor. Problematically, to join is to participate in redefining the desire-aversion dynamic as a form that is above. So instead of heeding the words and works of people like Gadamer, Genlin, Merleau-Ponty, or Levinas to stand with and next to the dynamic, we embolden the dynamic, that is that hegemonic desire-aversion dynamic, distancing it from our actual lived experience, and thereby avoiding the feel we have of this dynamic at any given time.